Yes. Yes, perfect. And then the dracolich will pop out of the... Oh, hello there! Welcome back, players and Dark Watchers. I was expecting you. I'm glad you finally made it. How fortuitous that you've arrived. I find myself just about to begin an exhaustive look into the world of Etharis, presented by Ghostfire Gaming. A world that you all will become very familiar with very soon. But fortuitous, I say, because of this letter I just received. This letter addressed not for me, but for you, dear players and Dark Watchers. It says, "Welcome, adventurers, to Etharis. I would rather you had arrived here at a happier time, when civilization was still at its height, when there were still gods who watched over this land's denizens. Those days are long past, and we all must somehow carry on. Etharis has changed. It is a land haunted by restless dead and unspeakable monstrosities. Its people have grown colder, insular, superstitious, partial to violence and murder. I cannot say it is a good time for adventurers. So, I share this guide with you to help find your bearings, faster in Etharis and stay alive longer, blah, blah, blah." You know, Otis was always one to exaggerate. It's fine. I'm sure it'll be fine. Right? Yeah. It'll be fine. It's good. Hello, everybody. In all seriousness, today we're going to be talking about the world of Etharis, and I would like to welcome you to the first video for Pact Tactics. And this is going to be the first video of probably 6 where I, your Dungeon Master, Jon, will be going over the lore for the world of Etharis as a primer and a guide, a quick start guide for everyone who is interested. This, of course, is Ghostfire Gaming's product, Grim Hollow. Both the campaign guide and the player's guide, which we will be using. And for the world of Etharis, honestly, we cannot talk about the history of the world of Etharis unless we talk about the history of the Bjork Empire, and that is going to be the subject of this first video. A general world overview and a deep talk about the state of the Bjork Empire in the western half of the continent of Etharis. To quote, "The land is dark and dangerous, the gods have all disappeared, and only monsters remain, both men and beast." Etharis is not a very happy place. This is a grimdark campaign, that's why the book is called Grim Hollow. And to set your expectations for anything else would be dishonest of me. So as we go through this, keep in mind that in a grimdark campaign there are subjects that will be broached that some people don't like, or that may be a little bit too intense for some people. And for those people, this is your warning. Grimdark is both grim and dark. If we're going to start this, I'll go ahead and start, and I will be looking from page 18 of the Player's Guide. And in this, we're going to talk about the history of the Bjork Empire. Now, in the world of Etharis, long, long ago, back in the age of antiquity, the gods roamed and created Etharis, as gods do. And during this time, they shaped the universe into some sort of order. They needed to impose order. And so the gods, both good and evil alike, banded together to form a pantheon. They formed the seas, the land, the creatures, as gods do. And all of these creatures started to worship the gods, as mortals do. And beyond the universe, beyond the stars, there were these other beings, these Aether Kindred. And all these Aether Kindred did was appear and destroy cities, entire races, stars out of the sky. They would devour them all. The gods did not like this. And so, in their wisdom, most every god left Etharis in order to wage war against the Aether Kindred. And they all died. Only 4 gods remained after this Aetheric War, as they called it. The 4 gods that remained were Galt, the Builder, Malagant, War-clad, god of, you guessed it, war, Ulmir the Wise, and Aurelia of the Heart, goddess of healing. They were the only 4 that did not go to the Aetheric War, and they were the only 4 gods that survived the Aetheric War. And so Etharis, for all of modern history, since the Age of Antiquity through the era of expansion, was shaped by the hands of these 4 gods alone. Now, this is a general overview of the world, but let's talk about magic. Because what is the world without magic? Back during the era of expansion, where humans moved across the continent, one particularly talented human went by the name Rakan el Adikar, and he was the first and greatest authority on the nature of arcane magic. He determined that it came from a parallel dimension to the material plane, a place that he called Numenera, and he called this energy Numen. And according to Rakan, whenever you cast a spell, you focus Numen to create the magical effects that you like. That is the secret to arcane magic in this world. And has been ever since. To learn arcane magic, you would have to have gone to either the Erlefit colleges in the Bjork Empire, the Ravencourt Sanctuary, far off in the land of Rievo in Astoria, the Sarmar Academy, which is exclusive to the elves, or one of those troublemaking renegade colleges that end in explosions. Because of the state of the world and the state of magic, society in general does not trust mages. They do not trust wizards, warlocks, sorcerers, bards, any type of arcane caster. And in some parts of the world that we'll be getting to later, like the Castellan provinces, a simple cantrip will get you burned at the stake. Something definitely to keep in mind. But even outside of the provinces of the Castellans, if you go into the common town with the ability to cast magic, you're dealing with people who haven't seen a weapon in their lifetime, let alone magic spells. Perhaps the only time these people have seen magic spells is when a traveling cleric came through and gave them a bountiful harvest 50 years ago. Or they prayed to an empty set of ears and instead something dark answered. Etharis is a land of curses and darkness, not a land of light. And as the book says, what makes you think that the darkness will release it so easily? So that is a quick down and dirty on arcane magic. And as far as the nature of divine magic, and this is in regards to all you clerics and paladins out there, divine magic is, they come up with a really cool concept for divine magic. And what that is that you had these 4 gods that I had mentioned earlier. Galt, the Builder, Malagant, War-clad, Ultir the Wise, and Aurelia of the Heart. You had these 4 gods. And then they went insane. And I promise, I'm building up to the Bjork Empire. I promise. We're getting there. Just bear with me. But the 4 gods, because of the Bjork Empire, went insane and all started challenging each other for who would be the great and true one god of Etharis. And they all died because of this. No god survived. So Etheris is a land with no gods. Instead, their lieutenants rule unabated, attempting to grasp at the shards of divinity that remain. And the orders of clerics and paladins, the only thing they can do is either dedicate themselves to one of these flawed arch-seraphs or arch-daemons, or go to darker practices to siphon some divine energy to power their abilities. Your arch-seraphs, you have Etheris of Valor, who works for the War God. He is a favorite of holy warriors, courage and strength. You have Zabriel, the Seraph of Truth, who worked for the goddess Teferia, a neutral goddess. But he is an arch-seraph of knowledge and truth. There is Arphalion of Temperance, and he holds sway over the domains of peace and spirituality, a patron of monks, clerics, and peacemakers. Solima is the arch-seraph of justice, and in certain parts of the world, like Estoya, they call her Lady Vengeance. Moriel is the arch-seraph of sacrifice. He looks over the domains of heroism and compassion. And the final is Miklas, arch-seraph of mercy, who is the goddess over arch-seraph over healing and freedom from suffering. But where there is an arch-seraph, there is also an arch-daemon out to oppose them. First, opposing Valor, Imperius, we have Bilith, the arch-daemon of fear, the trickster, the laughing man, and black jester. Opposing Zabriel of truth is the arch-daemon of deceit, Vanen, the great deceiver, dusk tongue, and the hooded. Cetri, the arch-daemon of hedonism, also called Blood Rose or the Tempter, opposes Athalon of temperance and all of his followers. Then we have Goradin of avarice, the king of red coins. This god of greed opposes Solima, because even the rich must fear justice. Next we have the arch-daemon of pride, although he prefers the title god. His name is Malakir, and he is the most powerful out of all the archdemons, and he opposes Moriel of heroism. Finally, we have the archdemon of wrath, Tormok, manslayer and marauder, and he's the closest thing that there is to a war god, although all he revels in is destruction. This is important if you're planning on playing a cleric or a paladin in Etharis, because how does this affect your character? Where do you get your magic from? Are you the one special exception? Are you a follower of one of the archdaemons or arch-seraphs? Or perhaps there's some latent divinity and maybe an Asimar or a downcast lineage. Something for you to consider. And since we talked about the arcane and we talked about the divine, it's only fair to talk about nature magic. This is for the rangers and the druids out there, and some very, very strange barbarians. One might call them wild. If we're talking about nature magic in Etharis, we need to talk about the primordials. Back in the beginning of time, when the gods were still around, all of the gods, not just the four, before the Etheric War, before the age of antiquity, the gods created stuff. As we said, they created the sea and the land and the air, but they didn't know what they were doing because they were new to this whole being a god thing. And so they put a little too much power into their creations, and that created the elementals. In particular, it created Gaumadrog, the prismatic worm, the chief of the primordials, a tiny little being that carried just a spark of divinity. Very small little guy. And this small little guy was so cute that the gods decided to keep him as a pet. I imagine, I don't know all of you out there who have seen Frozen 2, but there's this little salamander with flames that likes to lick his eye. I imagine Galmadrog looked like that, at least in the beginning. However, just as with children, over time, their playing turned to cruelty. And the games that they played with Galmadrog were no longer fetch, but fetch this piece of yourself, as they destroyed and resurrected him time and time again. And each time they did, he grew stronger and stronger. But he also grew in hatred. He knew that he didn't have the power to defeat the gods, but he bid his time for millennia, and never forgot how badly the gods treated him. The final straw for Galmadrog was whenever the gods declared the very land that he was made out of was the dominion of their favored pets, these mortal races, who they were neither cruel nor callous to. They didn't destroy them and rebuild them. They allowed them things like happiness. And this was something that Galmadrog, the prismatic worm, could not abide. And so, he went through and he created an army of his children, an army of beings connected to elemental power unmatched. He created an army of dragons. And he sent this army of dragons against the fury of the gods. And the gods destroyed most of these dragons, because they're gods. And that's what they do. But, always a believer of the silver cloud, the great worm Galmadrog saw that this emboldened the gods, made them brave enough to go to war against the Aether kindred. This is what sparked the Aetheric War that destroyed most of Galmadrog's tormentors, all but 4. And thus, Galmadrog the prismatic worm outlived the gods that created him. Most of them. However, he wasted no time. He created 4 more children of his own. One of fire, earth, air, and water. And he breathed life into these 4 elder elementals and gave them names. But he wanted to make them strong this time. And so he treated them the way his parents treated him. He forced them to fight each other, learn each other's weaknesses, and snuff each other out. Kill them and resurrect them time and time again, letting them get emboldened just to remember whose claws they're underneath, which caused his children too to hate him the way that he hated the gods. Centuries went on like this, until the gods, the primordials, of which there were 4, the Burning Lady, Morakesh, the Emberheart, Alondo of the Deep, ruler of the Endless Sea, Citralak, the Living Mountain, and Ilhara, the Queen of Air and Shadow. And they found these adventurers. Kintigern, founder of the lands to the north. And they enabled Kintigern to defeat Galmadrog, the prismatic worm. Now, this long story does have a point, I promise. And the point is, if you use nature-based magic, druids, and rangers, every bit of your magic is driven from the primordial and nature-based of Galmadrog himself. Kintigern and his friends, we will go into more detail about what happened with him when we talk about the Graljord to the north, but they put him to sleep. Galmadrog sleeps under the earth to this day. And every time you cast a spell in Etharis, you risk waking the primordial worm. How badly do you really want to call lightning today, Druid? Something to consider. So, that is the nature of magic in this world that we are in. I think I will call this a short video, and I promise the very next video will be about the Burek Empire and the history of that. So, Dark Watchers and player characters, thank you for joining me. I am once again your DM Jon, and I hope you join us all Tuesday nights to watch Pact Tactics as my player characters journey through this world. See you next time.